final speaker for this morning is Janet Gellici. She's the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer from the National Coal Council. So if you would, help me welcome Janet.
Forge ahead here. Great. Okay, yeah, it does work. Thank you. So, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I'm daunted by the great presentations we've heard so far this morning. So, but I think what I have to relate here this morning to you actually does relate to the presentations that we've heard so far. So. I am Janet Gellici. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the National Coal Council. We're an advisory group to the Secretary of Energy. We've been in existence for 30 years. We provide advice to the Secretary on matters relating to policy and technology. We serve under something called the Federal Advisory Committee Act, so we are not a lobbying group. We serve strictly as an advisory group to the Secretary of Energy. Our members are appointed to serve on the council. We have currently about 125 members. We're chartered on a biennial basis, so we are limited to about 125 members. Our members represent various sectors, including industry, as well as vendors. We have a strong academic component. A lot of engineering firms are represented, as well as a handful of environmental NGOs and other government entities, including public utility commissioners. Over the course of our 30-year history, we have done more than 30 studies for the Secretary of Energy on various topics. Most recently, we've been focused a lot on carbon management issues, I would say, for the last probably 12 years or so. A lot of our studies for the Secretary have been focused on carbon management issues, but what I'd like to talk with you about today is a study that we just completed for the Secretary in May of this year on the existing coal fleet, taking a look at the value of our existing coal fleet. The study was conducted earlier this year between January and May, and our membership approved the study in mid-May. And we were answering a direct request from the Secretary of Energy to look at what could be done to enhance the capacity, the efficiency, and the emissions profile of our existing coal fleet. So as you can see, this fits in quite well with the 111D regulation. We were very intent on getting this study completed prior to the EPA announcement of its 111D regulation in June, because we felt it would add to the dialogue and contribute to the conversation on the regulation. So the Secretary did also ask us to talk about the jobs implications, and we did that, as you'll see. Basically, here's an outline, general outline of the study that we've done. I did bring a few copies of the report with me that I have to hand out, but certainly can take cards and get that to you, and it's up on our website as well. It's very readable. We made an effort to keep it to under 90 pages or so. So I think it's a very concise report and covers a lot of territory, which you'll see. We were conducting this study, as I mentioned earlier this year, and coincidentally, we were in the midst of the polar vortex experience in January and February as we were going through this study, and it really reinforced to us the value of the existing fleet. This slide takes a look at the months of January and February 2014, and that's in the green, compared to the same months in 2013 and 2012. And I think what's quite evident here is that coal was the leading source of power, most especially in the 2014 January-February timeframe. Coal certainly stepped up this time, but many of the units that were critical for us in 2014 will be gone, as Paul just mentioned, post-MATS in 2016, and we're left with the question of what then. We did look at the winter of 2014 versus 2013, and again, we can see that coal generation provided 92% of the increase in incremental power that was needed to get through that polar vortex experience. The demand for power was greater in 2014, but we can see that natural gas generation decreased. A lot of the natural gas was diverted to fuel residential heating needs. Natural gas prices soared to over 3 times that of coal. And again, without the coal plants that were slated to go offline, in 2015, 2016, we believe that many regions of the country would not have met their demand for power. And again, as Paul mentioned, reliability, affordability are certainly at question when we don't have this diversity of fuel supply. We did take a look, profile the existing coal fleet. We have about 310 gigawatts of power right now. Much of that is scrubbed. Bob mentioned this morning, has some very good statistics, I thought, on what remains to be scrubbed or have NOx or SCRs put on them. Most of our units have high efficiency particulate matter controls on them. In 2012, we were fueling about 37% of our nation's electricity with coal-fired generation. In our report, the Secretary had asked us kind of to take a look as well at what was going on, not just with some of the larger investor-owned utilities, but also look at the rural electric cooperatives and the public power utilities. And their reliance on coal-fired generation is much higher. So, we're looking at electric co-ops, about 58% of their power is from coal-fired electricity, and about 45% of that of the public power utilities is reliant on coal. So certainly the implications of regulations and demands here are felt even more strongly in those sectors. EIA is projecting plant closures totaling 60 gigawatts by 2016. A little bit more on that here later. So we started our report by taking a look at what benefits the existing coal fleet brought to bear. And we started with a look at the direct and macroeconomic benefits, and primarily, overarchingly, the primary macroeconomic benefit associated with coal-fired generation is obviously the lower cost of electricity. So we thought, well, how can we assess a value to the existing coal fleets? And we came up with a scenario in which we said, okay, if you were to replace coal with natural gas sources, which is the next least expensive generation source, what would that look like? I'm not going to go into the calculations here this morning. They're detailed in our report, but let me give you some of the punchlines. So the graph on the left shows an increase in the cost of electricity from that first year of about $54 billion. The cost rises to $90 billion by 2040. And if you're looking at an increase of that magnitude, say a 15% increase in the price of electricity would reduce U.S. gross domestic product and employment, we calculated by 1.5%. So let me put that in real numbers for you. We would be looking at a $240 billion decrease in GDP and a loss of $2 million. So again, this is a way for us to assess and put a value on the value of diversity of a portfolio. I think we talk a lot about the need for diversity, and intuitively we understand that there's a value proposition there, but I think the opportunity to present some hard numbers on what that means is important, and we did try to do that in our report. The other benefit we looked at was supply and price stability. Coal has traditionally provided a buffer against higher electricity prices. I think the future of natural gas prices may be challenging to predict, but we can certainly predict that it will be volatile, at least based on past records and even most recent history. So we believe that continuing to close baseload coal will result in higher electric rates, higher manufacturing costs, and increased heating costs. A couple of the other benefits that we looked at, environmental regulations. I think we've seen the slide here on the left this morning, but significant decreases in criterion pollutants as a result of some of the efforts and investments by our utilities in response to regulations. We believe that CO2 emissions can be reduced significantly at older existing units with some additional support and additional controls. And we do believe that some of the CO2 technologies can be advanced or expedited with the use of CO2 for EOR. We conducted a study for the Secretary in June of 2012 that took an exclusive look at the business value and the business case for using CO2 for enhanced oil recovery. And again, that report is up on our website. In terms of responding to the Secretary's request that we assess what the job potential was of enhancing the efficiency and flexibility of the existing coal fleet, we did not in this report peg any specific level of efficiency improvement, and I'll discuss why in a little bit, but we didn't project a likely average efficiency improvement for the fleet, but we based some calculations for job purposes on EPA data. EPA suggested that a 2 to 5% reduction in heat rate was possible in some of their earlier reports. One of the consulting groups that we consulted with projected that about 22,000 new jobs could be created for each percentage reduction. So net, our projections are 44,000 to 110,000 jobs could be projected as a result of some of the efficiency improvements to the existing fleet that could be accomplished. So after looking at the coal benefits, we turned to what some of the challenges were facing the existing coal fleet. This chart, you can see the blue line is the electricity generation between 1950 and 2010, and the red line shows the annual rate of growth in generation. So in that early period of time in the 50s and 60s, we were seeing growth on the order of 6 to 11%. If you can believe that, it's hard to imagine now electricity growth at those levels, but it was happening. Since 1995, we've been experiencing 2.5% or less. We even had some years in which there was negative growth in electricity demand, 2009, 11, and 12. Usual suspects in terms of decrease in electricity demand, economic conditions, demand-side energy efficiency activities initiatives are working. We've also seen a shift from the manufacturing sector to the service sector, and a shift as well to less energy-intensive industries here in the United States, all of those reducing our electricity demand. So as I think about this, I think the low rate of growth in electricity power demand emphasizes the importance of preserving that existing fleet. And when I talk to my friends about this, I kind of equate it with, okay, we've gone through some hard economic times since 2008. How many of you in 2008, 2009 were saying, I'm going to run right out and sell my house? Economic conditions are so bad, I'm just going to buy a new one. So most of us, I think, said, okay, let's look at what our existing assets are, my existing house, and what can I do to make improvements? What can I put an addition on? Can I fix the roof? So it's that same kind of securing the value from your existing asset base that I think is important in connection with the decreasing demand for power generation. We also looked at one of the challenges, natural gas prices. On the right, we can see that our track record for predicting natural gas prices is very poor. It's all over the place. On the left-hand side are EIA's most recent projections for the delivered price of gas to utilities. So EIA is projecting an increase of over 3% per year between now and 2040. For natural gas, for coal, and during that same period, it's 1%. So a 3% increase for natural gas projected by EIA, 1% for coal. And a lot of those, I think the prices for natural gas, obviously going forward, will be impacted by new environmental regulations that are impacting that industry sector. We're seeing greater export potential, LNG, There's a need for expanded pipeline capacity and gas storage infrastructure. We're all dealing with aging infrastructure issues. The coal industry is not unique to this. Natural gas is experiencing that as well and will require significant investment in order to improve their infrastructure. So the pricing really going forward is questionable there. Environmental regulations certainly are a challenge. We've heard about those this morning. New and emerging environmental regulations will reduce the coal fleet operating flexibility and obviously will require more expensive compliance strategies. We believe that regulations and market conditions are driving retirements in the coal industry, as we've heard this morning, possibly up to 20% of the existing coal fleet, if not more. Cumulative impacts of these regulations, 10 gigawatts of coal capacity retired in 2012 alone. EIA is projecting another 50 gigawatts to be retired by 2020, so that's 60 gigawatts. And what I'd like to point out is that 60 gigawatt estimation is based on existing regulations as of 2013. So that includes MATS regulations. It does not include any of the water regulations 316B. It does not include coal combustion residuals, effluent guidelines. It does not include any of the CO2 regulations. So new source performance standards or 111D, our impacts are not included in that projected retirement of 60 gigawatts. EIAs, based on their 111D projections, believe that coal capacity could decrease to 195 gigawatts. So you can see that green bar for coal in 2020 could drop another 50 gigawatts down. So pretty significant implications. Another challenge that we addressed quite heartily in the report was the implications of new source review. The intricacies of the new source review regulations were somewhat beyond the scope of our report that we conducted for the Secretary, but the larger concepts were important for us to understand because they impact the development and use of technologies that we talked about in the study to enhance the efficiency of the existing fleet. So under the EPA interpretation of new source review since the late 1990s, many of the technologies to improve capacity or the efficiency of the existing units would not be considered routine maintenance, repair, and replacement, and would in fact trigger NSR requirements. EPA has confirmed that this issue exists. This quote is from a report that they did in 2002. Bottom line for us is that new source review is a fundamental barrier to improving power plant efficiency and reliability. My reading of the 111D rule suggests no relief for NSR, no NSR relief, and suggests that none is needed. I was at a meeting right after the regulation was announced. One of the EPA officials suggested that 90% of the units should be able to proceed with efficiencies without triggering NSR, but I do believe those questions remain and need to be addressed. I was also at a meeting which Senator Heitkamp remarked that it would be a fiduciary transgression on the part of the utilities to consider efficiency improvements without taking into account new source review implications. So this continues to be an issue and one I think that needs to be addressed. And then finally, in terms of the challenges that or not finally, I've got two more, let's see. Age of the fleet. We've heard some discussion about that again this morning. This graph shows the rapid growth of coal generation in the U.S. between 1950 and 1980, with quite limited growth thereafter. There's certainly no fixed endpoint for the useful life of a coal power plant. Large capital investments do get more problematic or difficult to justify the older a unit gets. But again, for investments with relatively rapid payback, we do believe that age is not necessarily a factor. It's certainly taken into consideration, but there are a number of opportunities that exist to enhance the existing coal fleet. And then finally, the final challenge we addressed in the NCC report focused on reduced funding for research and development. This graph shows kind of a combination of research and development and demonstration funding. So the red bars are just research and development. The green bars are demonstration projects. And 2 points here, I guess, that I'd like to leave with you. Research and development funding, those red bars we can see has been relatively constant over the past decade, with the exception of the administration's 2015 budget request, which is a significant decrease from earlier requests. Actually, it's down about 64% compared to the average appropriations for the previous 11 years. So if in fact we are serious about addressing greenhouse gas reductions emissions, I do have to question whether we are putting our money where our mouths are in terms of commitments. And then the other point I would like to leave with you is on the green bars. That's the demonstration project funding. The Department of Fossil Energy used to get an annual appropriations for demonstration projects, but has received no funding since 2009, and that funding was allocated under the Recovery Act funding, and that allocation, quite honestly, is not necessarily secure. About $145 million of the $3 billion that was allocated has already been returned to Treasury. There are deadlines looming in September of 2015. Unless some deadlines are met, that money will go back to Treasury. And I'd like to point out that that money, if not used, does go back to the U.S. Treasury. It does not go back to DOE. It does not go back to another coal-fired or fossil energy project. So that money will, in fact, be lost. So that was all the lead up. The really bulk of the report and the technical aspects we focused on was what could be done in terms of technology in 3 areas. And Roby touched on many of the aspects of this in his opening remarks. I'm just going to briefly talk about what we saw. So on reliability and flexibility, larger generating units in the existing coal fleet were obviously designed to run as base load units. We're finding that they're increasingly being called upon to operate in cycling modes, primarily due to low natural gas prices and renewable portfolio standard mandates. So this is resulting in frequent shutdowns and startups, increasing load following operations. And all of these factors are presenting challenges to reliability, efficiency. They're challenging the environmental emissions control equipment that we have. They operate differently in base load mode versus cycling mode, and certainly economic implications are pretty strong. Bob mentioned this morning some of the units that we're retiring were smaller, less efficient units. These units have historically provided fleet resiliency during times of high systems demand, such as what we experienced during the polar vortex. And we believe that retirement of these units will certainly impact the ability of the existing coal fleet to be flexible. So we need to get a better understanding of the operating systems under these cycling conditions and what we can do to improve materials and sensors. In terms of efficiency, I mentioned earlier that we did not say that there was a specific percentage of heat rate or efficiency that we could target or suggest could be attained by the existing coal fleet. There's just too many variables. And as Paul mentioned, I thought it was well put, Paul. If you had a plant manager who could get 6% efficiency improvement, you'd probably fire him. A lot of the plants already have put these efficiency improvements in place, and it's just critical to their operations. They'll do it from an economic market perspective. So the NCC report does address efficiency improvements that can be put in place across the board, whether it be from coal beneficiation to treating the coal before you put it into the plant, all the way through the end use. And there are many efficiency enhancing technologies that already exist and that are detailed in our report. But again, it's not a one-size-fits-all opportunity. And the opportunity to use these technologies is going to vary across the fleet. They're very highly site-specific. Even the altitude at which a power plant is located can impact the efficiency rates. So we believe modest efficiency gains can be achieved with existing technologies. If we want to get into some of the more advanced technologies like topping and bottoming cycles, that's going to require some additional research and development on the part of industry and the Department of Energy. And then finally, we looked at emissions reductions, what could be done for the existing coal fleet, and we looked at this in two ways. One was for the existing conventional emissions, and one was for reductions of CO2. For conventional pollutants, we felt that the fleet was well equipped now to handle particulate matter, NOx, and SOx. One of the key issues that we talk about in the report is the fact that you have more stringent reduction requirements, which leads to continually adding some new emissions control equipment, which then leads to issues relating to the integration of those new emissions control systems, which creates, in effect, some new emissions streams. So getting a better understanding about how these things work and the integration and interaction is important, and providing a sufficient amount of time for us to understand and appreciate that is necessary. In terms of CO2 emissions reductions potential, this graph presents a timeline of the key demonstration and experiences anticipated to have an effect on the commercial availability of CCS technologies in North America. What we found was that the time projected by the National Energy Technology Lab to develop appropriate retrofit technologies and the age of the existing fleet are significantly in conflict. We did not believe that there was a significant opportunity for CCS retrofits to be applied to the existing coal fleet. Certainly it's important and valuable for us to continue to pursue development of CCS technologies. We're working on a study right now for the Secretary that provides a gap analysis and assessment of DOE's programs for RD&D in this area, and that's going to be completed in January of next year. So I'll close up with just a review of some of our findings and the recommendations that we presented to DOE. The existing fleet, we believe, offers many benefits, and those benefits we feel are in jeopardy due to plant closures and our over-reliance, increasingly over-reliance on natural gas. There are numerous regulations that are impeding opportunities for us to improve the existing coal fleet, and we do believe that industry, government, collaborative RD&D is critical in the areas of increasing the flexibility of the fleet, the efficiency, and certainly the reliability of the fleet. Past research and development has proven out the point that significant benefits accrue from the investments that we have made. Every $1 investment is yielding a $13 benefit. We do believe that modest, again, efficiency improvements are possible, more advanced improvements possible with some additional RD&D. And CCS is important to pursue, albeit with limited applications for the existing fleet at this time. So what we recommended to the Secretary, above all, we need a commitment by DOE to support coal. We need to demonstrate that our nation values diversity of generation and promote the need for that diversity. There are a number of federal assessments underway, the Quadrennial Energy Review, the President's Export Initiative, the President's Manufacturing Initiatives. All of these efforts need to take into account the value of low-cost electricity, the value of a diversified portfolio. We here in the United States, our electricity prices are about half of those in the European Union. We need low-cost electricity in order to maintain our competitive edge in global markets. We did suggest to the Secretary that he conduct a debrief on the polar vortex of 2014 and what it portends for the future. And we encouraged the Secretary to work with EPA on new source review to eliminate barriers to coal fleet power plant efficiency improvements. And then finally, we champion the need for continued RD&D in various areas, advanced materials, sensors and monitors, the impacts of cycling, topping and bottoming cycles, commercial demonstration of CCS. Above all, we need to accelerate these efforts. Again, if we're serious about controlling greenhouse gas emissions, it's imperative that we we do these activities and do them in an accelerated manner. So I did want to thank a few folks. I know there's a number of people in the audience from Southern Companies. Southern Company chaired the study, and our technical lead was Steve Wilson from Southern Company, was invaluable to us. Some of these names may be familiar to you. We also had great support from American Electric Power, a number of utilities, PSE&G, again, here represented today, and appreciate that support as well. So that's what I have. Again, the study is up on our website, and I do have a few copies with me, and happy to get that into your hands if you're so inclined. So happy to entertain any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Ken Mitchell with EPA. In doing your cost and benefit analyses of the various sorts you did you take into account the costs of the changing environment? So, for example, the polar vortex that we had last year, severe weather events like that are anticipated to occur more frequently and in some cases be more severe as we move into a changed climate world. And there are costs associated with that, not only on our physical, our houses and electricity prices and whatnot, but on susceptible communities, people who are least able to deal with those changes, and so on and so forth. There's a whole array of impacts.
Right.
So did you take those costs into account when calculating the costs and the benefits of the various issues you evaluated?
We did not. That was beyond the scope of what we were able to do in this report. What I love about your question, though, is I briefed EPA on this study about a month ago, and there's a consistency. That question came up in that briefing as well, so it's certainly something that I'm taking back to our leadership. Again, we looked at the polar vortex as we were kind of in the middle of it. I'm just now getting reports back from NERC on some of their assessments, and those were just released, I think, a couple of weeks ago. So we did not have the resources to be able to take a look at that. We were strictly, when looking at the polar vortex implications, looking at the increased use of coal, and we did not do a cost-benefit analysis on that.
Thank you.
Would be a good thing to do. Other questions?